ladies and gentlemen. This all started a while back when a good online friend of mine created a video that caused quite the atomic level of butthurt. But I think due to recent events I should try to one-up him. Thank you, Hindenburg, for being both the great giant fucking disaster, as well as inspiring this beautiful creation. I had a few ideas on how I could recreate and remaster such a great work made before me. After all, I can't ignore my original inspiration. Of course, I'd like to keep my sources anonymous, so names have been changed to protect the innocent or sometimes the guilty. I'm going to cram everything into one video, so it'd be a massive disservice if I disregard concepts I decided on discarding. I originally conspired to make this a battle rap, before turning this into a mockery through satirical imitation.
Hey everybody, here's another episode of Shaft OS Livestream, and I've got something cool to show you. I implemented foreskinning.
That's you. That's how dumb you sound.
Before finally deciding it's better off just to follow the format and refine it. Of course I knew this was going to cause a massive shitstorm, but this video had to be made. Sometimes you're given a choice but fail to act upon it, and find yourself in one of those situations. Of course, I didn't have to infiltrate the Discord like the sneaky Soviet spy bastard that I am, but when you decide to do something like this, I always like to go above and beyond. If only the people involved could recognize concern trolling, and that it's generally not a good idea to trust someone who only started speaking on your server a few days ago. If anything, it's a bad idea to trust a young group of teenagers to run a 100+ user community. I'd also like to thank Discord for making multi-accounting so goddamn easy. Though after this display of Chernobyl levels of retardation, I don't think I'll ever even need to go back. Provided that I'm able to get back in, however, once they realize this video is up. Once they realize this video is up, I suspect they'll lock it down tighter than North Korea. Now to introduce the subject, the schizophrenic computer kid, in all his glory. Now nothing Hindenburg said in his video was untrue. The reason the video was removed was because Skitz decided to have an embarrassing meltdown, mirroring the maturity of a 3-week-old fetus. His reason for this was because he was scared for his privacy. The video in question, however, did not mention Skitz by name or have any identifying information. The irony is, however, that Skitz uses his full name on the internet. Of course, what's the rational thing to do when you're mocked by a YouTube channel with less than 50 subscribers? You guessed it correctly, it's go on an embarrassing raid of someone's IRC server to get back at them with titanic levels of tard rage. Ultimately coming out with more egg on your face than you went in with. And of course, any spastically short-sighted raid wouldn't be complete without a huge amount of salty tears. And denying the source never had any comedic value because you're a victim of your own history. It's just a hard truth that you can't mention Skitz's history without it sounding like mockery. It's just a bizarre level of absurdity that matches Chris Chan. Now I'd like to take a look at the video, not produced by me, but someone else. This will be quick because I'm only taking the best bits of the 45-second clip. Not only is it painfully apparent that Skitz was being butthurt over the subject of satirical humour, he was also suffering anxiety attacks over the thought that his love interest and gay butt buddy would find out. Of course, the mature individual that Skitz is decided it was a good idea to have his closest friends and associates, who he uses to compensate for his real-life social deficiencies, also came to his defense to scream like infants about how the video was going too far. I can also bear witness to Skitz saying he broke his headphones upon finding the video, showing that he clearly has anger issues and can sometimes resort to physical acts of violence when triggered. Of course, Skitz fails to understand how criticism works and how it can be used to drive someone to better themselves, regardless if the criticism is part of a joke or not. The reason Skitz is in this situation is a simple lack of foresight and self-awareness. Much like his real blindness, this metaphorical social blindness only allows him to see roughly 3 feet in front of his face. Many people have told him how bizarre his behaviours are, and how they're as comfortable as being molested by a Catholic priest. But yet again, he continues to forget the advice given to him as if he's Dory from Finding Nemo, smoking a shit ton of crack, and smashing his brains out with a jackhammer. In a lot of cases, the act of Skitz just keeping his mouth shut could have prevented him from being the laughing stock of just a group of 50 people. And certainly there's far worse fates on the internet. Another outright and obvious flaw in Skits' character is the inability to acknowledge his absurdity or even show an ounce of humility. This often results in him acting like a sponge and soaking in every minor prod made towards him. He's made well aware of the strange and somehow potentially sexually motivated his obsessions are with fictional characters, and how it aligns with symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. It has even been speculated that this obsession extends out to the internet personality and YouTuber OS First Timer, who many agree that Michael sees OS First Timer as either a replacement for a close friend or a father figure. The guy is the ultimate compensator, like the guy who drives a giant Ford F-150 and carries around a micro penis everywhere he goes. Celebrity worship syndrome is a joke I made up ironically, not realizing it's a real condition. As you can see here, Skits outright admits to having CWS. Don't take it from me, take it from the logs I have of him confessing he jerks his gherkin to OSFT videos. Speaking of jerking the gherkin, Skits has also been known to frequently share weird as fuck sexual messages and fetishes. If you think just spanking the monkey to an internet personality was bad, that's just the icing on the cake. If having sexual attractions to a 10-year-old cartoon character and literally wanting to fuck your laptop is shown by this quote here, I don't know what to think. The only thing that could make this more depraved, more perverted, and more fucked would be as if Skits were to join the adult baby diaper loving community. Yeah, I feel like I should apologize for even sharing those images.
Holy fuck, is this wrong?
Now, it wouldn't be a complete video if I failed to mention Skits' echo chamber of insanity and paranoid delusions, where even logic and reason dare not tread. I visited this place myself and witnessed the horrors that can only be described as nightmarishly down with the syndrome. Michael was once told about how his lifestyle of sitting in front of a computer for 16 hours a day and being a social recluse would cause severe health effects. A quote from Skits himself: "If I take a break for 20 minutes every 2 hours, I'll lose an hour for every 8 I spend at the computer." Isn't that pathetic? The sad part of all this is the people in his echo chamber have no real concept of how health works, and back him up saying he's doing just fine. I personally don't expect him to live beyond the age of 45 before he has some major health problem related to being a neckbeard. As we've already discussed, Skits possesses social deficiencies, has an unhealthy connection to computers, and shows some traits of autism spectrum disorder, so it wouldn't be completely unreasonable that he could potentially be another Adam Lanza. It would be well advised that Canadian law enforcement restricts his access to firearms in the event that he does decide to become an hero. Social defects are obvious, but when you're quoted as saying, "The only people you speak to at your school are the school counselor and the principal," get help. With that, I'd like to play a game of Spot the School Shooter, and for every similarity with the school shooter, I'll add 10 points. Let's see how Skits fares. Possible autism spectrum disorder, Adam Lanza. Difficulty connecting and socializing with peers his age, Adam Lanza. Fixed interests and unwilling to go outside his comfort zone, Adam Lanza. Unusual levels of tard rage towards school, Eric Harris. Obsession with computers, Adam Lanza. Absurd victim complex, Dylan Klebold. Possible schizophrenia, Kipling Keneal. Strange sexual fetishes, Dylan Klebold. Using bizarre methods to gain sense of power and adequacy, Adam Lanza. Worshipping an idol to extreme lengths, in this case, continuing the development of a game even though the majority abandoned it, Adam Lanza. Resorting to physical acts of violence over mild incidents, every school shooter ever. And that adds up to a grand total of 666 points. Skits is literally the devil himself. We broke the fucking scale. If I were his parents, I'd be monitoring his internet usage and making sure he isn't storing maps of the school under his mattress along with his Rule 34 fanfiction. I think his status as a future school shooter is confirmed. While most school shooters are as mentally stable as a house of cards, and while some were slightly vision impaired, none of them were legally blind. I'm of the opinion this would greatly reduce the casualties in the event that Skits does go NBK. Seeing as Skits could only hope to hit a large group of people, and would fail to pick off individual targets with any accuracy, even with a 40 times scope. To gain the accuracy of a 20/20 person, he'd need an electron microscope attached to the rifle to achieve the same level of accuracy. It's safe to say that 90% of his shots will either hit the ceiling or the floor. Skits thinks that roasting videos are only okay provided they don't have the potential to offend. This in itself is a more backwards position on free speech and humour than trying to stop the spread of AIDS by holding a massive orgy. The simple fact that someone would lose sleep over the retelling of factual events is absurd. End quote. It's literally destroying me. He goes as far to say that if Hindenburg's videos ever gain any traction, it would somehow ruin his life. Now you think that the amount of time that Skitz spends behind a computer, that something productive came out of it. Well, no. He blatantly flaunts that he's the lead developer of an experimental, and I'm putting this lightly, game, which for several months only gameplay was a deformed version of Pong. The project crashed, burnt, and somehow rematerialized several times like a deformed Down syndrome phoenix, except only marginally as cool as that. This is due to spastic obsessions from those that were oxygen deprived at birth. To say the game and its development team is like a Hydra is only partially correct. This Hydra is a series of genetic birth defects that's just begging for someone to put it out of its misery. ShiftOS, the hacking sim game, isn't a product of someone who can't program for shit like the hilarious Trinity OS associated with community members who also tried to make it a product. It's the product of somebody who fundamentally doesn't understand game design. The entire project fails because of its lack of any real substance and just feels like you're navigating a bunch of windows for no particular reason at all. And the player, I mean the unfortunate victim, doesn't partake in anything exciting, thought-provoking, or eventful at all. I've played text adventures that were more entertaining, and yet this game has been in a weird development cycle for at least 3 years now. Couple it with the promises of a story written by a teenager still in high school. I don't expect much of a bestseller from Stephen King, but more of a sonnetu from a half-witted retard. Referencing the Hindenburg again, Skitz loves to play the victim card, and this quote makes it clearer than anything because Skitz brings up how Hindenburg supposedly made fun of his vision. Of course, I can't find any reference in the video in malice, as the video is pointing out weird behaviors, and not simply making a video stating, "Hey Doug, this guy's so blind, funny, hey duh." And with that reasoning you might ask why I made a joke about it previously. It's mainly because I'm proving a point. I know how Skitz is going to react, and if I'm right, he'll just make even more of a fool of himself, and show that he hasn't really learned anything at all, despite having everything laid out in front of him. Now that we've caught up, we can look into how Skitz is doing in the present day. Recently, OS First Timer opened up a Discord server, and Skitz, along with a pair of other incompetents, were put in a position of power again. If only OSFT spent more than 2 minutes researching how to set up a Discord server, and finding staff that were above the mental age of 7, it would have been running a lot more smoothly than the Soviet nuclear reactor it is. Setting the scene, I have a few friends and some other visitors of the voice chat. We were all just joking around having some fun, usual stuff. It wasn't until Skitz became the butt of a sex bot joke that he became ultra triggered and couldn't see I was making an absurd point, not literally telling him to learn robotics so we can make a mechanized humping machine. It was also at this time another moderator, who also happened to be an enabler from Skitz's echo chamber, became ultra triggered and decided to speak up. Both obviously not understanding the joke, this other moderator, we'll call Dog Whistle, also became hyper triggered. Despite claiming to be 15 or 16, I've encountered 12-year-olds with deeper voices and even younger people who are way more emotionally mature than to ban someone for simply making a hyperbolic joke about something so pathetic. Coming to the conclusion, I'm putting the ball in Skitz's court and giving him the opportunity to learn from what's happened, or let him scream about the video and how it's unfair, despite being a factual recount of what actually happened. Hopefully these quotes from the IRC raid will be a thing of the past, and that he gets enough self-awareness to realize that he was 50% of the reason why there was a colossal shitstorm, instead of avoiding all responsibility as if he was 4 years old. Hopefully this all about me attitude and mentality goes away, but only time can tell. All I can really say at this point is that if he had a problem with the true factual recount of events, he should take it up with me instead of making an ass of himself for the whole world to see. You can either stop being a victim and move on, or forever get upset over menial bullshit like an 8-year-old. Also, feel free to demote me from my moderator position on Discord. I don't really care, to be honest, but by all means, if you want to do it, go ahead. You're just likely exposing the fact that your staff aren't qualified as you thought they were. Your move. If I ever make another one of these videos again, be sure it's either on Pizza Face or whatever the fuck those adult baby diaper fetishists are doing. Catch ya.